During my SATs, my teacher asked me, "Why don't you drop your pants in front of the class?" "Why would I do that?" I whispered back, trying not to disturb the other students. "Because I've been watching you across the room. You've been fiddling with your pants." She crossed her arms like she'd caught me red-handed. "Would you believe me if I told you it's because I have to pee?" It was true, but I could tell from her face she wasn't buying it. She shook her head and her voice got louder. "That's nonsense. You're cheating." Other students started looking up from their test booklets. The room was supposed to be silent except for pencils on paper, but now everyone was watching our confrontation. My face burned with embarrassment as more heads turned our way. "How would I be cheating?" I asked, genuinely confused. "You have something in your pants. I don't know if it's a phone or a cheat sheet, but you're using it to help you. That's how you finished this section of the test faster than everyone." She pointed at my answer sheet, which was mostly filled in. I'd always been terrible at standardized tests. My grades were decent, but something about those bubble sheets made my brain freeze up. That's why I'd spent the last 3 months studying every single day. Practice tests, vocabulary flashcards, Khan Academy videos until my eyes burned. I needed a good SAT score to make up for my mediocre GPA if I wanted to get into a decent college. I'm not a good test taker, so I studied extra hard for the SATs to hopefully make up for my bad scores on college applications. I tried to explain, but she was already shaking her head. Mrs. Gordon leaned in closer and lowered her voice, but somehow made it more venomous. "Your parents are drug addicts. There's no way you had time to study. You probably sell drugs yourself." "That's an accusation." I stood up without thinking. My parents had their problems, but they'd been clean for 2 years. They'd gone to rehab and meetings and worked so hard to get better. For her to throw their past in my face like that made my blood boil. And accusing me of selling drugs just because of my family's history was beyond unfair. The other students started murmuring. Desiree, who sat behind me, spoke up. "He's been in the library every day after school. I've seen him studying." "Yeah, he's always asking me math questions," added Carter from across the room. More kids chimed in defending me, but Mrs. Gordon wasn't having it. Her face got redder, and she raised her voice over theirs. "Unless he drops his pants and shows he doesn't have anything, I'm reporting him to College Board and he will face numerous academic penalties." The room went silent. Everyone stared at me, waiting to see what I'd do. Getting reported to College Board meant this test wouldn't count. It meant colleges would see an accusation of cheating on my record. It meant everything I'd worked for would be ruined. Fine. I was so angry I could barely speak. I stood there in front of 30 other students and undid my belt. My hands were shaking with rage and humiliation. This was insane. No teacher should have this kind of power, but I couldn't risk my entire future on principled stand. I dropped my pants to my ankles, revealing my Rick and Morty boxers. Some kids gasped. Some girls smiled. Others looked away. But then something fluttered to the ground. A folded piece of paper fell out of somewhere and landed between my feet. I stared at it in shock because I had no idea where it came from. It wasn't mine. The paper just sat there between my sneakers while 30 pairs of eyes stared at it, and nobody moved or even breathed for what felt like forever. Mrs. Gordon lunged forward and grabbed it before I could even think about reaching down myself. Her fingers closed around the folded paper, and she held it up like she'd just found buried treasure or something. I stood there frozen with my pants still around my ankles while she started unfolding the paper with this huge smile on her face. The corners made little cracking sounds as she opened each fold and smoothed it out to read what was written there. She waved the paper above her head and announced it had vocabulary words written on it, but they weren't even for this section of the test we were taking. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grab my belt loops to pull my pants back up over the Rick and Morty boxers. The button on my jeans kept slipping through my fingers while Mrs. Gordon kept talking about how this proved I was cheating, even though the words weren't for this part. Someone in the back row started recording on their phone, and I heard the little camera sound it makes when you start a video. Mrs. Gordon told everyone to put their pencils down and stay in their seats while she went to the classroom phone on the wall. She picked up the receiver and pressed some buttons to call the main office while I finally got my pants fastened and my belt buckled. The whole room stayed dead quiet, except for the beeping sounds of the phone numbers, and then Mrs. Gordon asking for the assistant principal to come immediately. She hung up and pointed at me to get out in the hallway right now while everyone else had to stay seated for the investigation. I walked past all those staring faces and through the door into the empty hallway where the fluorescent lights made everything look weird and harsh. The door clicked shut behind me, but I could still hear whispers starting up inside the testing room and more camera sounds from phones. My legs felt weak, so I leaned against the cold brick wall and tried to slow down my breathing that was coming too fast. Through the little window in the door, I could see kids turning around in their seats to look at where I'd been standing. Some of them were showing each other their phone screens, and I knew they'd captured the whole pants thing on video. The hallway stretched out in both directions with nobody else around, since everyone was supposed to be in testing rooms right now. I heard footsteps coming down the hall and saw Serena Morgan walking toward me in her navy blue suit and low heels that clicked on the floor. She had a folder in one hand and her phone in the other, and her face looked serious but not angry or anything. When she got close, she asked me to explain everything that happened from the very beginning without leaving anything out. I told her about needing to pee and Mrs. Gordon watching me and accusing me of cheating because I finished the section fast. Then I explained the 3 months of studying every single day after school and how Mrs. Gordon said that thing about my parents being drug addicts. Serena's eyebrows went up when I mentioned that part, and she wrote something down in her folder with a pen she pulled from her jacket pocket. She asked me to repeat exactly what Mrs. Gordon said about my parents and whether anyone else heard it too. I told her the whole room heard it because Mrs. Gordon's voice had gotten loud when she was accusing me of selling drugs myself. Serena wrote more notes and then handed me a blank form and a pen to write out my own statement about everything. She said to be as detailed as possible and include times and exact words if I could remember them while she went to talk to Mrs. Gordon. I sat down on the floor with my back against the wall and started writing on the form using my knee as a desk. Through the door, I could hear Serena's voice getting firm and then Mrs. Gordon's voice getting defensive, but I couldn't make out the actual words. My hand cramped up from writing so fast, but I kept going because I wanted to get every detail down before I forgot anything. Other classroom doors started opening as kids went between testing sections, and some of them saw me sitting there and whispered to each other. Serena came back out after about 15 minutes with the folded paper in a clear plastic bag like evidence or something. She told me she was confiscating it for the investigation and would have to report this whole thing to the college board as a testing irregularity. My stomach dropped when she said college board because that meant my scores would probably get canceled and colleges would see it on my record. She must have seen my face because she put her hand on my shoulder for a second and said we'd work through the process step by step. The door opened again, and Dennis Riley came out carrying a box of tissues and a bottle of water, which he handed to me. He sat down next to me on the floor and asked if I was okay after what just happened in there with everyone watching. I told him about the boxers thing and how humiliated I felt having to do that in front of the whole class. He nodded and said that should never have happened, and we'd address that part separately from the cheating accusation. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to see 3 text messages from kids in my class, plus one from my mom asking why the school called. I typed back to my mom that there was an incident at the school, but I'd explain everything later when I got home. I didn't want to worry her and Dad while they were at work because they'd been doing so good with their recovery. Dennis asked if I wanted to call them, but I shook my head because I knew they'd leave work to come here, and they couldn't afford to miss hours. Between the next testing periods, I saw Desiree and Carter walking toward where Serena was standing by the main office. Desiree had her phone out and was showing Serena something on the screen while talking fast and pointing back toward the library. Carter was nodding and adding stuff about how I asked him math questions all the time in the hallway between classes. Desiree swiped through what looked like photos on her phone and showed one where I was passed out on my books in the library. Serena took notes about what they were saying and asked them each to write statements just like she'd asked me to do earlier. After they left, Serena came back over to where Dennis and I were still sitting and crouched down to our level. She explained that the college board would definitely put my scores on hold while they investigated, which could take several weeks to resolve. That meant I'd probably miss early application deadlines for colleges, since my mediocre GPA really needed those SAT scores to balance things out. The bell rang for lunch and I grabbed my backpack to head out, but my phone started buzzing like crazy. I pulled it out and saw notification after notification from group chats and social media. Someone had taken a picture of me standing there in my Rick and Morty boxers and turned it into a meme with the caption, "When you study for 3 months but still get caught cheating." My stomach turned as I scrolled through the messages and saw it spreading everywhere. Kids were adding their own captions and laughing reactions and sharing it to every platform. I couldn't face walking into the cafeteria with everyone looking at me and whispering. Dennis appeared in the hallway and saw my face and asked if I wanted to eat lunch in his office instead. I nodded and followed him down the empty hall while more notifications kept coming through my phone. He had a mini fridge with some sandwiches and sodas and told me to help myself while he worked on some paperwork. I sat there eating a turkey sandwich that tasted like cardboard while watching the memes spread to more and more group chats. After school, I was heading to my locker when Aurelia Snow called my name from the library entrance. She waved me over and said she'd heard about what happened during the test and wanted to help. She led me to her desk where she had her computer open to the lab sign-in system. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up records from the past 3 months. Every single day after school, my name was there logged into the computers from 3:30 to 6 or sometimes later. She printed out page after page of the logs and put them in a folder. "I'm taking these straight to Serena Morgan," she said, and marched toward the main office. I went home and tried to do homework but couldn't focus on anything. My parents asked about my day, and I just said it was fine because I didn't want to stress them out yet. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling thinking about everything that happened. Part of me wanted to just let it go and take the makeup test and move on with my life. But then I thought about Mrs. Gordon's face when she talked about my parents being drug addicts. I thought about how she made me drop my pants in front of everyone just to humiliate me. I sat up in bed and made a decision that I was going to fight this no matter what. The next morning, I woke up to an email from the college board with the subject line, "Score Hold Notice." My hands shook as I opened it and read the automated message about my scores being under review. It said the investigation could take up to 6 weeks, and during that time, my scores wouldn't be released to any colleges. 6 weeks meant missing every single early application deadline, which basically ruined my college plans. I screenshot the email and sent it to Serena, who replied that she'd officially filed the report yesterday as required. She asked me to come to her office before first period to discuss some new developments. I got to the school early and went straight to her office where she had the plastic bag with the paper on her desk. She put on gloves and carefully unfolded it to show me what was written on it. The paper had vocabulary words, but they were for a completely different section of the test than the one we were taking. The handwriting was neat and small, and definitely not mine since I write big and messy. "This is good for your case," she said, while taking photos of the paper from different angles. She explained that Mrs. Gordon had submitted her written report about the incident yesterday afternoon. The report included a detailed description of how she made me remove my pants in front of the class. Serena's face got serious as she explained this was a major violation of testing protocol and student dignity. The district HR department was now involved because forcing a student to undress crossed multiple policy lines. She said they'd be investigating Mrs. Gordon separately from the cheating accusation, which might actually help my case. After that meeting, Dennis found me in the hallway and asked me to come to his office after school. When I got there, he had boxes of my stuff spread across his desk and floor. He'd gone to my house and gotten all my SAT prep materials with my parents' permission. We spent 2 hours organizing everything into a timeline showing my study progress over 3 months. The Khan Academy app on my phone showed over 200 hours of practice problems and video lessons completed. We printed out screenshots of my progress charts showing how my practice scores slowly went up from 1180 to 1400s. I had receipts for 5 different SAT prep books that I'd bought with money from my part-time job. Dennis put everything in a binder with tabs and labels to make it easy for anyone reviewing the case to see the evidence. That night, the meme got worse with new versions popping up everywhere. I finally decided to post one response on my main social media account, focused on clearing my name, not the jokes, I wrote, and then muted all notifications. Some kids actually commented that they respected me for not freaking out about it. The next day, Serena called me back to her office with a new piece of information. She'd been reviewing the seating chart from the test and noticed something strange about Grayson Thacker's placement. He'd originally been assigned to sit across the room but switched at the last minute to a seat near me. The proctor's notes showed he specifically requested the change, claiming his original seat had bad lighting. Serena pulled up the testing room layout on her computer and pointed out that both seats had the same overhead lighting. His new seat put him directly behind and to the left of where I was sitting. After school, I waited by Grayson's locker until he showed up with his basketball gear. I asked him straight up if he'd planted that paper on me during the test. He leaned against his locker with this smirk on his face and said I couldn't prove anything. Then he mentioned how stressful this whole thing must be for my parents right now with their history and everything. That comment made my blood boil, but I just walked away because getting into a fight wouldn't help anything. Later that day, Serena called Grayson to her office, and I watched him walk in with his usual cocky attitude. I waited outside pretending to tie my shoe while they talked, and heard him telling her about some window glare problem in his original seat. She asked him to show her on the seating chart, but his explanation didn't make much sense since both seats had the same overhead lights. After he left, she caught me in the hallway and said she couldn't prove he was lying, but something felt off about his story. The next morning, Aurelia came to find me before first period with the plastic bag containing the cheat sheet. She pointed at these little doodles in the margins that looked like cartoon characters and said she'd seen Grayson drawing the exact same ones on his flashcards when he studied in the library. She took photos of the doodles and went straight to Serena's office to add this to the investigation file. During lunch, Dennis pulled me aside and we talked about what happened with Mrs. Gordon making me drop my pants. He explained that forcing a student to undress was a serious violation, and I should consider filing a formal complaint separate from the cheating investigation. I spent the rest of the day thinking about whether I wanted to open another can of worms, but kept coming back to how she'd talked about my parents. That night, I told my parents everything, including Mrs. Gordon's comments about them being drug addicts. My mom's face went pale, and my dad's jaw clenched, but they both stayed calm and told me to do whatever felt right. The next morning, I went to Dennis's office, and he helped me write out a formal complaint about Mrs. Gordon's behavior. He showed me the Title IX policies and discrimination guidelines that she'd violated by making personal attacks about my family. We submitted the paperwork through the proper channels, and the district office said they'd have to investigate this separately from the testing incident. Word got around fast, and by lunch, Mrs. Gordon was telling anyone who'd listen that she was just being careful. She claimed another school in the district had a huge cheating scandal last year, so she was extra vigilant during testing. Serena heard about this and told me privately that being worried about cheating didn't give her the right to humiliate students or make discriminatory comments. That afternoon, the principal called me to his office with a warning that made my stomach drop. He said if I pushed both complaints, the college board might decide the whole testing room was compromised and invalidate everyone's scores. My classmates could lose their test results because of my complaints, which would mean they'd all have to retake too. I left his office feeling sick because now I wasn't just fighting for myself, but potentially ruining things for 30 other kids. That night I couldn't sleep and kept thinking about whether clearing my name was worth messing up everyone else's college applications. My parents sat with me at the kitchen table, and my dad said something that stuck with me. He told me people would always try to pressure me into backing down when I stood up for myself, but I had to do what was right for me. The next morning, I checked my email and found a message from the college board that actually gave me some hope. They said regardless of the investigation outcome, they'd offer me a free makeup test date in 6 weeks. It wasn't perfect since I'd already studied so hard for this one, but at least I'd get another chance to take it legitimately. Later that day, my parents went to meet with Serena about Mrs. Gordon's comments. They brought documentation from their recovery program showing they'd been clean for 2 years with perfect attendance at meetings. Serena seemed really impressed by how calmly they handled everything and said she'd add their statement to both investigation files. They told her about all the family dinners we'd missed while I studied and how they'd quiz me on vocabulary words during car rides. My mom even showed her receipts for the SAT prep books she'd bought me with money from her overtime shifts. That evening, I was doing homework when my phone buzzed with a text from Taylor, who sat 3 rows over during the test. She sent me a screenshot from a group chat showing Grayson asking if anyone had a vocabulary cheat sheet 3 days before the SAT. The timestamp showed it was posted the Wednesday before the test, and he'd specifically asked for one small enough to hide. Taylor said she didn't want to get officially involved because Grayson's friends were mean, but she thought I should know. I stared at that screenshot for a long time, thinking about how everything was starting to make sense. Grayson had planned this whole thing and somehow slipped that paper near me during the chaos of the confrontation. The seat change wasn't random, and neither was the cheat sheet appearing right when I dropped my pants. But without Taylor willing to come forward officially, I just had another piece of evidence that couldn't really help me. I saved the screenshot anyway, and decided to show it to Dennis tomorrow to see if there was any way to use it without getting Taylor involved. The next morning, I showed Dennis the screenshot on my phone and watched his face get serious as he read through the group chat messages. He leaned back in his chair and explained that without Taylor willing to testify, we couldn't use it officially, but we could mention to Serena that students had seen concerning messages. I put my phone away, feeling frustrated because I understood Taylor's fear of Grayson's friends, but this was proof he'd been looking for a cheat sheet. Dennis called Serena and asked her to come to his office, and when she arrived 20 minutes later, he told her about anonymous student reports of suspicious messages. She took notes and said anonymous tips could only do so much without someone willing to go on record, but she'd add it to her investigation notes anyway. That afternoon, an email came through from the district HR department, and I read it 3 times to make sure I understood what it said. They'd reviewed Mrs. Gordon's actions during the testing incident and found she'd violated multiple protocols, including forcing a student to undress in front of others. The email said she was removed from all testing duties immediately and would need to complete retraining before being allowed to proctor any exams again. I felt a small bit of relief knowing she wouldn't be able to do this to another student, but it didn't fix my current situation with the college board. Dennis found me in the library after school and sat down across from me at the study table where I was trying to focus on homework. He told me I needed to stop feeling guilty about all the attention this was bringing to the school and reminded me I hadn't done anything wrong. We spent the next hour practicing how to stand up for myself without constantly apologizing or making excuses for taking up people's time. He had me repeat phrases about my rights as a student and how to advocate for myself without backing down when adults tried to make me feel small. 2 days later, another email arrived from the college board requesting additional documentation for their investigation. They wanted the official seating chart from the test day, Mrs. Gordon's training records, and any surveillance footage from the testing room if available. Serena forwarded me the email saying she was gathering everything they requested, and this showed they were taking the irregularities seriously now. The security officer came to the testing room that week and spent 2 hours examining the layout and taking measurements. He moved desks around and had another staff member sit where I'd been while he tested different angles and positions. After his review, he wrote up a report saying someone could potentially slip a paper under a desk from behind during bathroom breaks or other movement in the room. It wasn't definitive proof that someone planted the paper on me, but it showed it was physically possible for it to happen without me knowing. I was walking to my car after school on Thursday when Mrs. Gordon appeared from behind a pillar in the parking lot. She blocked my path and started talking fast about how I was ruining her career over nothing and asking if my parents were proud of raising such a vindictive kid. I tried to walk around her, but she kept stepping in front of me, and her voice got louder as she accused me of trying to destroy her life. What I didn't notice was a sophomore named Hendrix standing by the bike racks recording the whole thing on his phone. Mrs. Gordon kept going for another 2 minutes saying I was a liar and my family was trash before she finally stormed off to her car. Hendrix came over and showed me the video asking if I was okay and saying that was messed up what she'd done. I asked him to send me the video and thanked him for recording it because now I had proof of her harassing me outside of school. The next morning I sat in Dennis's office as he watched the video with a concerned look on his face. He explained there were legal complexities about using recordings, but since it happened in a public space and Hendrix recorded it voluntarily, we could submit it. I decided to include it as evidence of continued harassment because this wasn't about revenge, but showing a pattern of bias against me. Dennis helped me write up a statement about the parking lot incident, and we submitted it along with the video to both the district investigation and the college board review. Within 3 hours, Serena called Mrs. Gordon to her office, and we could hear raised voices through the walls, even from down the hall. The next day, Mrs. Gordon wasn't in her classroom, and word spread quickly that she'd been reassigned to administrative work only with no student contact while under investigation. Some teachers seemed to support her and whispered about unfair treatment, while others said she'd gone way too far with the pants incident and deserved consequences. The whole situation had split my class down the middle, with some kids saying I was brave for standing up to her and others saying I was making too big a deal out of everything. I tried to focus on the friends who'd supported me from the beginning and ignored the ones spreading rumors that I was just trying to get attention. During lunch, I sat with Desiree and Carter, who'd both defended me that day in the testing room, and they helped me laugh about other things instead of dwelling on the drama. Later that week, Aurelia called me to the library and showed me something interesting she'd noticed while organizing supplies. She held up the original cheat sheet in its evidence bag and pointed to the blue ink used to write the vocabulary words. Then she pulled out a specific pen from her desk drawer and explained she'd lent this exact brand to Grayson the week before the SAT when he'd asked to borrow something to write with. She'd remembered because it was her favorite pen, and she'd made him promise to return it, which he never did. Aurelia took photos of both the pen and the cheat sheet and immediately went to add this detail to Serena's investigation file, even though we all knew circumstantial evidence could only do so much. The next few days, I kept my mouth shut about Grayson, even though everyone was talking about the pen thing. I saw him in the hallway between classes, and he gave me this weird look, but I just kept walking. My friends kept asking if I was going to tell Serena about Taylor's screenshot, but I couldn't do it. Getting into some big fight with him wouldn't help my case, and might make me look like I was just trying to blame someone else. I spent that whole week waiting for the college board to make their decision while trying to focus on my other classes. The email finally came on Friday afternoon while I was sitting in the library. My hands shook as I opened it on my phone. They were canceling my current scores, but I could retake the test without any cheating mark on my record. It wasn't perfect since I'd have to go through the whole test again, but at least colleges wouldn't see an accusation. I texted my parents right away, and they both replied with relief that it wasn't worse. That weekend, Aurelia helped me set up a whole new study plan for the retake in 6 weeks. She pulled out different practice books and made me a schedule that broke down exactly what to review each day. Dennis met with me Monday morning to work on test anxiety stuff since the last experience had been so awful. He taught me this breathing thing where you count to 4 breathing in and then 4 breathing out. We practiced it together in his office until I could do it without thinking about it. He also gave me these cards with positive statements to read before the test. My dad had to miss work twice that week for meetings with the school about everything that happened. He never complained, but I could see how tired he looked when he got home. Mom started looking worn out too from all the stress and worry about my future. They kept telling me we'd get through it together, but I felt guilty for causing all this trouble. Wednesday morning, I got an email from the HR department with an attachment from Mrs. Gordon. The subject line said, "Regarding recent testing incident," and I opened it nervously. She wrote about miscommunication and procedural errors without actually saying she did anything wrong. The whole thing sounded like lawyers wrote it for her. She never mentioned the comment about my parents or making me drop my pants in front of everyone. Dennis helped me write my final statement for the college board that afternoon. We spent 2 hours getting the wording just right without making accusations about anyone. I stuck to the facts about what happened without mentioning Grayson or going into detail about Mrs. Gordon's behavior. Dennis read through it 3 times and said it had the right professional tone. He submitted it for me through the official portal. 2 days later, word spread that Grayson got called back to Serena's office for another interview. Someone saw him walking out looking really pale and upset. People started whispering that administrators were looking into his other test scores from previous years. He stopped showing up to the library where he usually studied with his group. I'd see him in the halls, but he'd look away and walk faster. His usual friends seemed to be keeping their distance from him too. The next week, the college board sent out another email to everyone from our testing room. They were flagging 2 other students' scores for irregularities, but didn't say whose. Everyone started guessing who it might be, and Grayson's name kept coming up. He stopped coming to the group study sessions in the cafeteria after school. His friend circle got smaller, and people noticed he wasn't sitting with them at lunch anymore. I tried not to think about it and focused on my studying instead. The 6 weeks went by faster than I expected with all the preparation and practice tests. I'd wake up early to review vocabulary before school and stay late working through math problems. My scores on practice tests were getting better, and I felt more confident about the material. The night before the retake, I barely slept even with all the preparation. My parents made me a big breakfast and drove me to the testing center themselves. Walking into the building felt weird after everything that happened last time. The new proctor was this older man who went through every single protocol perfectly. He read all the instructions slowly and clearly without any accusations or assumptions. I used Dennis's breathing technique while waiting for the test to start. My hands weren't shaking this time, and I felt surprisingly calm as I opened the test booklet. The first section was reading comprehension, and I worked through it steadily without rushing. I remembered all the strategies Aurelia taught me about finding key words and eliminating wrong answers. The math section came next, and I took my time with each problem instead of panicking. During the break, I did the breathing exercises again and ate the snack my mom packed. The writing section felt easier than I remembered from practice tests. I finished each part with a few minutes to spare for checking my answers. Walking out of that testing room felt completely different from the first time. I didn't know what score I'd get, but I knew I'd done my best with everything I'd learned. My parents were waiting in the parking lot and hugged me when I got to the car. We went out for lunch to celebrate just finishing the test regardless of the results. 3 weeks dragged by with me checking the College Board website every morning before school, even though I knew scores wouldn't post until exactly 8 a.m. Eastern on release day. When the morning finally came, I sat at my computer with my parents standing behind me, refreshing the page over and over until the numbers appeared. My hands were shaking as I clicked through to see the breakdown, and there it was. A 1420 total with 720 in math and 700 in reading and writing. Mom grabbed my shoulders and squeezed, while Dad let out this huge breath he must have been holding. The score was right where my practice tests said I should be, and exactly what I needed to balance out my GPA for the state schools I was applying to. That same afternoon, an official email came through from the College Board with their final determination on my case. The investigation was officially closed with a finding of no academic dishonesty on my part, and they noted in the report that testing protocols had been violated by the proctor during the original administration. My record would show the clean 1,420 score with no notation about any cheating investigation, which meant colleges would never know about the whole mess. Dennis forwarded me the email with a smiley face and reminded me to save multiple copies for my records just in case. The relief felt like a weight lifting off my chest that I didn't even realize I'd been carrying for weeks. School got weird after that because Mrs. Gordon came back to teaching, but the administration moved her to only regular classes with no testing duties at all. The rumor mill said she had to complete 40 hours of sensitivity training and bias education before they'd let her back in the classroom. She'd walk the other way when she saw me in the halls and kept her eyes down if we crossed paths near the main office. Part of me felt bad for her, but then I'd remember her comment about my parents, and the anger would come back. Meanwhile, Grayson just disappeared from all the usual spots where the smart kids hung out. His name got quietly removed from the next SAT registration list, and people started saying he was taking a gap year instead of applying to colleges right away. Nobody ever told us students what the investigation found about him, but the way teachers looked at him in class said enough. His friend group got smaller and smaller until he was basically eating lunch alone in the corner of the cafeteria. By the time winter formal rolled around, the whole incident had become old news as everyone moved on to the latest drama about who was dating who and which teacher was rumored to be leaving. My close friends would still make jokes about it sometimes, but not in a mean way, more like an inside thing we all shared. The Rick and Morty meme finally died when someone else did something embarrassing at a basketball game and became the new target. My parents surprised me by signing up for extra recovery meetings after everything settled down. Dad said the stress of the situation reminded them how important their sobriety was, and they wanted to stay strong for our family. We started having these Sunday dinners where we'd actually talk about real stuff instead of just passing the salt and asking about homework. Mom told me she was proud of how I stood up for myself without losing my integrity, and that meant more to me than any test score. When it came time to write my college essays, I sat down with Dennis to figure out how to frame everything. We decided to focus on perseverance and standing up against prejudice without getting into the specific details about dropping my pants. He helped me craft this narrative about overcoming obstacles and maintaining dignity under pressure that sounded way better than what actually happened. Dennis wrote me this amazing recommendation letter that he let me read even though I wasn't supposed to see it. He talked about my character and resilience and how I handled a difficult situation with maturity beyond my years. He never mentioned the specifics, but colleges would understand something significant had happened, and I'd come through it stronger. Aurelia wrote me a letter too about all those hours in the library and my dedication to improving myself. Walking past that testing room on the last day of the semester brought everything flooding back for a second. I could almost feel the embarrassment creeping up my neck again and hear the whispers from that day. But mostly I felt proud of myself for getting through it all. I'd faced down a teacher who tried to use my family's past against me and came out with my dignity intact. The SAT score I earned through honest hard work would help me get into college, and nobody could take that away from me. Everything that happened taught me I was stronger than I knew, and that standing up for what's right matters even when it's hard and embarrassing and makes you want to hide under your bed forever. Thanks for hanging out and wondering through all of this with me. It's really been a journey worth sharing together. I'll catch you in the next one. Like the video, it helps more than you think.